Nurse.org and Major League Sports teams are honoring nurses with discounted game tickets and once-in-a-lifetime experiences. From throwing the first pitch to riding the Zamboni to on-court recognition, join the fun. Visit nurse.org/nurse night to find a nurse appreciation event near you and grab your discounted tickets today. You're listening to Nurse Converse, presented by Nurse.org, a collaborative podcast amplifying diverse nurse voices. Get ready for a dose of inspiration, a sprinkle of education, and a whole lot of community.
Hey guys, it's Jana Price. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Nurse Converse. And today we have got some interesting topics to talk about. First off, can you get reported for your TikTok? Can you lose your license over legal marijuana? And do you really need nurse malpractice insurance? These are all questions that we all want to know. We all need to know. And where do we go to ask these questions? That's always been the real question. But we have the expert today with us, and her name is Jamie Weiland, but many of you know her already as the legal MP. She has an extremely high presence in social media with a lot of things that we are all kind of watching when things come up in nursing. She's on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram as the legal MP, and she is a nurse practitioner who has a wealth of knowledge on all things legal, and she is joining us today. So thank you for coming on with us, Jamie.
Hi, Jana. Thank you for having me.
It is so awesome to have you on. I've been watching you for a while now. I saw you and I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity for us to chat and answer some of those burning questions that we're seeing happening daily in the news world and the media world that's coming out with the nurses. So I want to go ahead and start out. Let's chat a little bit about how did you get to be the legal MP? Where did you start from?
Yeah, so I actually started over 15 years ago in the military as a flight medic. So I did some military service. I was a nurse from a little baby girl. Like, I just always knew that I wanted to be a nurse. So I've been lucky to know that my entire life. And so I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to serve the country first. So that's kind of the route that I went. When I graduated nursing school, after I got out of the military, I went strictly really into the ICU, into the ICU realm. I was an ECMO coordinator. I did a lot of stuff with heart and lung transplants and absolutely fell in love with acute care, and then eventually went and got my acute care NP. And during that time, I actually realized that I didn't want to be an acute care NP, which is crazy going from bedside as an ICU nurse. But it was kind of during COVID, everybody was questioning everything during that time. And so I got a call one day to review a case, and that's essentially where my new career in law started. I finally left bedside full time a couple years ago, and I've just been working in law. So I primarily do product litigation and medical malpractice, and then board complaints.
Now, how did you get started as the legal MP on social media?
Yeah, I actually did not have a social media presence at all before I started the legal NP. I never had a Facebook. I really wasn't into social media. One day I took a nurse for a deposition with my attorney that I worked for, and she got absolutely hammered during a deposition. And what she was getting hammered for just blew my mind. It was because she charted refused meds for about 4 days in a row on a long-term patient. And she got annihilated by the plaintiff attorney over that. And so I woke up one day, and for some reason I chose TikTok, and I made this TikTok and was like, stop charting patient refused meds. It is your job to educate these people, because if not, someone will tell you about it later. And it blew up overnight. I hadn't even checked TikTok for like 3 days, and I had over 25,000 followers off of this one TikTok. And so I was, all the questions that came from it, I made other TikToks from, and it just snowballed into this.
With a huge following of great advice. And rumor has it, you may have a book coming out.
I do. I have a book that's called Chart Like a Lawyer. It's about just kind of keeping yourself safe as a nurse. They don't teach that in school. And I think the reason why we don't teach it is because our professors don't know. They don't know the legal realm either. And so we're just passing on used information that isn't necessarily true. And so having worked in law for the last 7 years, you really learn what matters and what doesn't. And so I've been working on this book forever, and it's finally ready to come out. I'm really excited. Hopefully, it'll give everybody a sight into what it actually looks like to be called for a deposition if you get a complaint to the board. So hopefully, it clarifies some of those questions and makes it not as scary for nurses.
What a great idea, and something that we nurses really need. So don't worry, guys, we're gonna have that information and see where to get her book. But we're talking about social media and we're talking about legalities. And I think right now, let's go ahead and start in and hit one of the biggest topics in nursing right now, because I know just a few weeks ago there was a viral post of a nurse doing something that was not very classy with Foley catheter, but we see it all the time. More often than not, nurses are in a hospital. They have their phone. They're filming content. And while that is an extreme case of probably not a great idea that this person did, we also have nurses who are doing good things and TikTok and doing things that are helpful to the nursing community. But that does not negate the fact that there are some legal ramifications for when you bring your phone into work and create content and the life you represent outside of work while you work for that hospital. So I'm going to let you take it away, and let's let everybody know, what does it really mean to have social media in your work?
Yeah. So healthcare became content in itself, right? So social media and healthcare exploded because people are burned out. We're tired. We want connection. We want other people to feel what we're feeling and to understand what we're feeling. We want family members to understand what healthcare workers are going through. But the thing that we don't understand is the legal system hasn't quite adapted to the speed that we are producing content. And that is very common in law. Law moves very slow. And so we're always at least 5 to 10 years behind. And so here's the problem. People think in terms of intent, but the law looks at impact. So they're two different things. And so you might think, I didn't show a name, I didn't show a face, I'm fine. But HIPAA isn't just names and faces. And we hear about HIPAA our entire career. We're all scared of it. We are all walking on eggshells when we hear the word HIPAA. And that's not necessarily how it has to be. You just have to know how to dance around it. So HIPAA is anything that could reasonably identify a patient. That's essentially the definition of it. So that includes timestamps, unique conditions, voices, screen monitors, anything. Like people have videotaped themselves with a cardiac monitor, not knowing that the patient's name is up in the corner. And these little sleuths on the internet, they can find anything and everything. And they will. And so on top of HIPAA, there's workplace policy. And these hospitals, that's a completely separate issue. They have every right to list the policy as they deem fit to keep their asset, meaning the hospital, protected. And so you can follow HIPAA and still get fired. So a lot of nurses don't know that. We've seen cases that people don't realize they're capturing information and it's too late. They put it on there. It was on there for 3 minutes and someone already screen recorded it. So we run into things like that. Once you press send, it is there forever. And you have to think about that before you post. It doesn't even matter if you delete it. It is there forever. And sometimes the consequence is losing your job. Sometimes it's going before the board. So it just depends. And once you're in that system, once you've made that mistake, that's a whole different game. Once you've made that mistake, it's hard to come back from.
And what about, we see some of these people, especially in times of high political conflict, they go on and say their opinions, or let's just say they are wearing something in the hospital, hospital logo, and they're out doing things that may not be something that the hospital supports. We just saw that nurses in the state of Florida lost their license based on things that they said. How do we know what's, I guess, the barrier there? What's the boundary that we know we should not be crossing that?
So we're all humans. We have lives outside of here. We have political opinions. We have families that have different political opinions. But as a nurse, we carry a license. And to our oath to our license and our Nurse Practice Act, in most 50 states, we take an oath to be professional and uphold our license. And so, for the instances that you're talking about, ESOs were issued in that case. And I'm not sure if those nurses have actually formally lost their license or if just an emergency suspend order has been placed. So if there's an emergency suspend order, they will go through an investigation and they can reinstate that. And that's usually what we see. But I mean, anything that you can chalk up to unprofessional conduct, they can get you for. And so we just have to be careful to our opinions don't necessarily have to say to ourselves, but they do need to not be broadcasted. So it's the oath we take.
Absolutely. Could not agree more with that. So this is something that we've talked about, unprofessional conduct. And this is where I want to go right now with that unprofessional conduct. The Pit. Do you watch The Pit?
I don't. And so many people,
Okay.
so many people have asked me. So you got to fill me in.
Yes. All right. So guys, we need to get her on The Pit. I know everybody. It is here. They've actually everything that we're talking about, they're pretty much covering on The Pit. And one of the main things is there is a very I don't want to ruin it for you. I want you to know, but there is a doctor who is caught diverting. There's some feelings and issues around drug diversion, and we all know there has been a recent case where a nurse practitioner was found overdosed in a parking lot, pregnant, and she had an issue. And that brings to the point we've probably all worked with people who have experienced diversion. We all may have people who struggle with addiction in our life. And that comes down to the question. It's very rampant in nursing right now, especially highly in the CRNA fields, but we have access and we have stress. But when it comes down to, let's say that somebody has a problem and they are caught diverting drugs or using on the job, what does that look like for your nursing license?
Yeah, sure. So drug diversion is actually the number one reason people get reported to the board. It covers a hefty amount of board complaints. When people hear drug diversion, they think theft. They think people are stealing the drugs. But legally and professionally, it's actually much broader than we think. It can be as simple as pulling a medication without an order. And people don't realize that. You can also get tagged for not properly wasting a controlled substance or not documenting the administration. And a lot of nurses get dinged for that because they don't realize that a lot of compliance officers within the hospital, they run audit reports every month. Pharmacists run audit reports every month. And if A doesn't match up with B, they will tag you for it. And if you get tagged more than once or twice, they'll pull you in and then they'll run an audit report on you. So it's not just that nurses are diverting and using drugs. Sometimes they're just making a mistake in their administration. And we do see that. And that's such a pain for those nurses because they have to go through going to see a psychiatrist, having an eval, seeing if they do have a problem. It's expensive, it's timely, and it's super scary, right? Like, imagine being blamed for being a drug addict when you're not a drug addict. That's really, really demoralizing to some nurses. And so what people underestimate is Omnicell and Pyxis. They're incredibly sophisticated now. They can track patterns over time and send reports to compliance without anybody even looking. And so where we see people get into trouble a lot that aren't diverting, we have people that are diverting for use. Yes, that is wrong. That will be investigated. But where we see a lot of people get into trouble where they kind of are blindsided is their documentation. ICU is really bad because we pull Ativan for our friend that's patient's having a seizure. And then what happens if our friend doesn't document it? That falls on you. And so we see that. We see timings, overrides, and behavior trends over time, and those audits automatically populate. So a lot of people don't know that. Once that happens, you're not just dealing with your employer. Your employer is legally responsible for that, and they have to report you to the board. If there's any, question of a nurse diverting, it is their responsibility as mandatory reporters to report that. And sometimes it leads to criminal charges. Things can escalate really quickly. And so there's a distinction between impairment and criminal behavior. Some boards offer monitoring programs. I'm in Texas. Our monitoring program is called TPAPN. And so you're able to go to essentially a rehab, depending on what they issue you as your remediation for that. And then you can have a supervisory period, probation period. So every state is a little bit different, but most states offer a second chance. So that's great. But going through the board complaint it's expensive, it's timely, and it'll really hurt your feelings if you weren't actually diverting for usage. So,
I've always known you need to chart, but I did not know that they'll see that you may not be
mhm.
active in the drug. And I think back to my trauma days. How many times are we in the Bay and we are just grabbing fentanyl? And yeah, your friend gives it. It's chaotic. And looking
Mhm.
back, You may have pulled it for a friend or they pulled it for you. Wow, I never thought about that. And I hope
Hmm.
everybody out there is listening to this. You make double
Yeah.
sure you're charting because you could end up with complaints for diversion, and that's intense.
Hey nurses, looking for exclusive discounts? Nurse.org has you covered with deals on everything. Save big on the essentials you need to excel in your career. Don't miss out. Visit nurse.org/discounts for the latest discounts made just for you.
Which brings us to the next thing. Let's talk medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Marijuana is legal in quite a few states now, and you can be a nurse and have a medical marijuana license, or it's just not illegal in the state. But that does not mean that it's legal for it to use at work, or is it? That is the question. So I've actually had some people ask me about this, thinking that I might know, and I am so glad you're here today to answer this. So anybody out there with a medical marijuana card or using marijuana because it's legal in your state and you're a nurse, let's listen to what Jamie has to say about it.
Yeah. So federally, marijuana is illegal, right? And so most hospitals that you work for will follow federal rules. They will have policies for no drugs. And there are some states like Colorado that it's been around a while and they don't even test for THC anymore in their drug tests. So there are some people that are being progressive about it. But there's a state versus federal conflict. Okay. So marijuana is still federally legal, and many healthcare systems follow federal standards when it comes to funding and regulation. And so if they follow federal standards for funding and regulation, then they have to kind of follow by their policies and their rules. But then on top of that, you also have employer policies, and a lot of them have a zero tolerance. Not all, but enough that you're taking a risk if you use it. And the board doesn't necessarily care about legality. They care about impairment. So you've got 3 different levels there, right? So the board doesn't necessarily care that you're using marijuana. They care about if it can be proven that you were impaired on the job. And with marijuana, that's a really tough feat. I had an instance the other day that I've gotten the okay to share this. A nurse reached out to me and she said, "Hey, I went to a festival in California. I took a couple gummies, but then I fell asleep at work. Someone caught me on the camera and they drug tested me." She was not impaired at work. She knew that she was going to test positive for her drug test, and she did. She had reached out to me like, "Hey, what's going to happen?" I just told her, "Hey, this is what's going to happen. You have to wait for your results. And then essentially your hospital will tell you what they're going to do moving forward." And their hospital surprisingly gave her a written warning and let her go about her day because they couldn't prove that she was impaired on the job. And so what I'm seeing with marijuana is it's really, really falling on hospital policy. And so for it to turn criminal, they have, or, a board complaint, popping positive for a drug test for marijuana isn't necessarily going to be an instant report to the board because, there's nurses that pop positive for amphetamines because of Adderall. And so there are other drugs that we can pop positive for. But if they have any inkling that you were impaired on the job, you can absolutely assume that you are going to be reported.
Let's say that something happens and a patient they're not impaired on the job, but a patient is harmed for just some form of negligence and they do get drug tested. Can they tie that to impairment?
Marijuana is hard, right? Because it can stay in our system for weeks. So I've seen many of these be fought in court. A lot of them aren't standing up like they used to. However, proving impairment is hard. And so, however, if you add negligence on top of it, they will absolutely go after you. And the number one reason is because that hospital doesn't want to be liable for a negligent nurse, especially if they were under the influence. And so I would always expect the hospital to turn my back on me if I was to test positive for a drug that I had in my system.
Wow, that's good information. Let's talk about what that looks like to protect ourselves. Do we need malpractice insurance? What is our hospital covering for us versus what do we really need?
Yes, 110%. This is what I scream from the mountaintops. You need your own insurance. You are your own person. You are your own license. You earned that license yourself. You did not earn it for your hospital. Will your hospital protect you in a lawsuit? It depends. There are some great hospital systems out there that I work very closely with that will bend over backwards for their nurses. They will cover them because they have insurance that covers them. They're usually in tort reform states. So they're usually in states that those verdicts aren't $7, $8, $9 million. Like, for instance, Texas is a tort reform state. So our max caps are 250,000. The hospitals are pretty good about, trying to take their nurse's name off the complaint and just kind of go after the hospital because the hospital has plenty of insurance to cover. However, there's a lot of things that your employer's policy does not cover. They do not cover board complaints. And so if you have a simultaneous lawsuit and board complaint, you're going to pay out of pocket for your board complaint. And when I tell you that those lawyers will charge you $450 an hour. So, and it takes many hours to write up motions and stuff like that. So it doesn't have anything to do with your license. Your employer will not protect your license at all. And that is the number one thing that you need to protect as a nurse. Okay. We're there to protect our patients and protect our license. That's why I say that all the time. Those are the two things. An individual policy gives you something very different. It gives you your own representation. And to me, that's extremely important, having sat through so many depositions, right? So if you get named in a lawsuit and a hospital gets named in a lawsuit, that can be a conflict of interest. And if you went against policy, that hospital is going to step away from you. And so you're going to actually not have any legal representation. And so it's always important to have your own because your lawyer works for you. The hospital's lawyer works for the hospital, not for you. And so just kind of ironing that out, it does not give you your own representation. That lawyer that's going to sit in a depot with you represents a hospital, not you. It does not cover board complaints, and it does not include any kind of license civil litigation that you can go through. And so it's really, really, really important that you have your own insurance. Absolutely.
That is fantastic information. And let's just chat about it. And I know this really isn't too much of our expertise, but the number one reason that I hear from nurses is why they don't have malpractice. I can't afford it. I have my own policy. It's $21 at the highest end and a month. And is that ever an excuse? Can you break down for us let's just say you paid $20 a month. Let's say you paid $50 a month. If you don't have it and something happens, what can you really be looking at as far as cost?
Yeah, so I just submitted a bill for $30,000 on a nurse case for the past month. So that's just 1 month. So if that gives you any insight, it could make a nurse go bankrupt for sure, especially as nurses now. A lot of nurses are living paycheck to paycheck. So it's extremely dangerous. And I also want to clear up one myth that I hear all the time. And you'll even hear it from attorneys. And the only reason why you hear it from attorneys is it makes their job easier. So let me make that clear before I say this. Having your own malpractice insurance does not put a target on your back, because when you get named in a lawsuit, the plaintiff that is naming you has no idea what insurance or lack thereof that you have. There's no national database that says this nurse has insurance, let's go after her. It doesn't even get proven until late into discovery when you have to give your insurance agreements in discovery. And so that is a huge, huge myth.
Wow. I didn't even know that was a myth, the fact that you could, but thinking about it, wow, I'm glad that we think about that, because here's the deal. The target is really on your back when you don't have insurance. And when you have to come out and pay this amount of money, I'm still kind of sitting here reeling over $30,000 a month that you just submitted. And we're not even done, right? The case is not even done, and he or she's going to be going through this. So guys, if there is anything that you're hearing right now, first thing you're going to do after this podcast is you're going to go follow the legal MP. And the second thing you're going to do is you're going to get insurance. So that's going to be the takeaway right in the middle of the show here. So that's going to be where we stay with that. But now let's talk about something moving from malpractice. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do feel, this is just my personal opinion, compliance issues in charting. And everybody, when I was at bedside, my number one fear was that I was going to get called into a courtroom, into a deposition, and have to answer for my charting. And there's so many things that you hear out there. Back charting versus late entry charting. Which one's correct? Which one is going to get you in the hot seat, and which one's going to keep you out of the hot seat? So, yeah. And then it's compliance, which all really comes to, compliance is not what we think it is. And so I'm going to hand that over to you right now. And let's talk about what compliance in our charting and our charting in general, where we stand with that.
Yeah, great question. And it's often misunderstood. It was actually something really big that I misunderstood until I got into law. So compliance gets reduced to modules and checkboxes, but in reality, it's all about your daily actions aligning with legal and regulatory standards. And so it's how you document, it's how you escalate your concerns, it's how you follow or don't follow policy. In a courtroom, no one's asking you if you completed your modules and you checked a box, okay? They're asking, did you recognize the risk? Did you act appropriately? Can you prove it? Is it charted? Would a prudent nurse in your same position do exactly what you did? And if the answer is no, then you're in the wrong, okay? I think electronic medical records have ruined our critical thinking as nurses. As a nurse that started with paper charting, I'm pretty sure you probably did too. We got so good at writing those narratives and being factual and being objective. And we get so bogged down with checking boxes, making sure our care plan, our education, our, assessments. In the legal world, they are going to ask you, did you notice that there was a risk? Did you notice that they were septic? Who did you tell? And what did you do about it? And did you come back to check on them? That's what that's going to be. And a lot of the times you can't prove that with check boxes. And I get those in my comments. I get those nurses in my comments all the time. I'm going to chart less because that means they can't tear it apart. I don't want to be sitting next to you when it gets torn apart because it's super nerve-wracking. And the amount of nurses I've seen cry in depositions because they were just told that they just have to do the check boxes. They just have to, fill this column in at 8, this column in at 12. But like during that full 12 hours, you showed zero critical thinking. You showed that you could slave vitals over from one machine to another. And so that's really where we're missing. And one big thing that I always harp on is lawyers love words, right? Their whole world is words. That's how they do their job. And so words matter in law. So taking 5 minutes to write a nursing note or right clicking and adding a comment and saying, patient normotensive after 1 liter bolus due to sepsis guidelines, blah, 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 whatever the situation is. If you put that in a note, I'm gonna promise you that lawyer's gonna look at that note the first thing. And so lawyers love nurses' notes, and you have no idea how many nurses' notes have not only saved themselves, but saved doctors as well. And so it's really important that we're using our critical thinking and not just checking boxes for compliance. The other thing is that those timestamps that employers are putting in their policies that you have to document at this time, this time, and this time, that's only for their compliance. That is so that they can audit charts. And it's for regulatory compliance so that they can get reimbursed. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes into your charting that we don't realize as nurses.
So, all right. Well, guys, I know I just had a wealth of knowledge. I don't even practice bedside anymore, but if I did, I would feel really, really, really more comfortable, more prepared with what Jamie has talked to us about. These are really important issues. And like she said in the beginning, nobody's teaching this in nursing school, but yet these things are really, really important things that we're doing every day that can cost us the license that we work so desperately hard to get. So staying on top of what you should and shouldn't do should be one of your main focuses in your education as you move forward in the nursing field. And how are you guys going to do that? Well, you're going to go follow the Legal MP. That is what she is on TikTok, IG, Facebook, LinkedIn. Are we missing any on there that we need to follow you at? Okay. And we're going to have all of that information for you to follow her on. She does almost every day. I feel like you've got some content on something that is very helpful for nurses, and you can even go back and look and see if there's something that's particular to you. As you've heard, she has people messaging her. She will answer your questions. And most importantly, when that book comes out, I'll be the first to get it because I think it's very important. It's Chart Like a Lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Chart Like a
Yes,
Lawyer.
ma'am.
And then guess what? You guys are going to save $450 an hour. So that's pretty important. And I want to say thank you again, Jamie, for coming on. And this probably will not be the last time we see you with Nurse.org because you are a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for being an advocate for nurses, for stepping out here and educating nurses so that they can keep the licenses that they worked hard for, keep patients safe, keep themselves safe. It's such a great honor to have somebody like you out there advocating for us nurses. So a million thanks from not just me, but I'm sure everybody that's watching.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, guys. So go follow the Legal MP and stay safe out there. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for joining Nurse Converse, brought to you by Nurse.org. Help us grow by leaving a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Nurse.org supports nurses with career and education tips, life advice, and breaking news. Thank you for all you do and for being you.